You can think of this next module almost like a part 2 of assertiveness training. Since anger is often sparked by conflict with another person, learning how to resolve conflict effectively is one strategy we can use to mitigate anger from worsening. By following this model, we can avoid some of those negative consequences that typically follow anger outbursts. In this next session, we will follow 3 examples of hypothetical conflicts through the lens of the conflict resolution model. I've attached a PDF that you can keep handy to remind yourself of the model and follow along with while you run through the prompts in this module in your notes or notebook. As most of us have probably experienced, conflict and anger tend to go hand in hand. Conflict can be the result of anger, but being angry can also cause you to seek out conflict. By learning how to handle and resolve conflict in a healthy way, we can separate its relationship with our anger response. One method which can help accomplish this goal is to utilize the conflict resolution model. The conflict resolution model starts by identifying what is causing the conflict and your feelings about the conflict. You can then analyze what the impact of the conflict is on you or the situation. You then decide whether or not you want to resolve the conflict. If you decide that the conflict is worth resolving, you work towards coming up with a fair resolution. Let's take a dive into how this works. The first step to resolving conflict is to identify what is causing the conflict. Think about the problem you're facing. We'll use a few scenarios here. 3 potential conflicts are that your husband forgot to plan your anniversary celebration, your neighbor left the trash out all week, or your family member won't stop calling. It is helpful to think about what is causing you turmoil in order to identify the next step. As you go through this conflict model together, pick one problem that you are having and follow along in the accompanying PDF that goes along with this module. After you've identified what is causing the conflict, focus on what your feelings are about the conflict. So, for example, when a family member incessantly calls you, you may be feeling irritated, annoyed, or pressured. When your neighbor leaves the trash out, you could be feeling embarrassed, frustrated, or out of control. When your husband forgets to plan your anniversary, you may feel uncared about, disappointed, or neglected. By doing this, you keep the focus on the actual problem. Many times when we become angry or emotional, we tend to shift the focus to other things rather than the actual conflict at hand. So step 3 is to recognize what impact this conflict is having on your situation. So for example, going back to the family member who won't stop calling you, the constant calls may be distracting during the workday, which is preventing you from getting your work completed. If we take the example of your neighbor leaving the trash out, maybe when your neighbor leaves the trash out, the wind blows your trash into your own yard, creating a situation that is potentially dangerous for your children who like to play outside. If we look at your husband forgetting to plan your anniversary, you may spend hours fighting, which leads you to go to bed upset. Due to this, distance could be created in your relationship. So after you uncover your emotions and the result of the conflict, you have to decide if you are going to resolve the conflict or let it go. Not all conflicts need to be solved, but you have to make sure that it is something you can truly let go of. Think to yourself, is this conflict important enough to bring up? If I do not attempt to resolve this issue, will it lead to feelings of anger and resentment? If you ultimately decide to resolve the conflict, then you go to the next step. If you do decide to resolve the conflict, then it is important to coordinate an appropriate time with the other person in order to discuss the issue. If you catch the other person at a time when they do not have the time to address it, you may not be able to resolve it with them. Once you discuss an appropriate time, you can describe the conflict, your feelings, and the impact of the conflict to the other person and ask for a resolution. Let's take the example of your family member who is calling too much. If you take a look at the bolded portions of the dialogue, you will see that you identified the cause of the conflict, your feelings around the conflict were expressed, the impact of the conflict was addressed, and you ultimately came up with a solution that worked for both of you. So you might say something like, "Hey mom, I wanted to talk about something that's been on my mind. Is now a good time?" She could respond, "Of course, what's on your mind?" Then you could say, "Great, thanks. I really enjoyed talking with you and value our relationship. You've been calling me while I'm at work too often, and it's a bit distracting, and I've been feeling a little overwhelmed. When this happens, I lose focus that I really need to get my job done correctly. Is there a time once a week that we can set up a longer time to talk? This way, we can still regularly connect with each other, Well, I'm in a space where I can be entirely present for our conversation. Hopefully, she would say, "Oh my gosh, I did not realize my calls were stressing you out or distracting you. Why don't we talk Saturday mornings? That way, you don't even have to be worried about work." And then you could say, "Thanks so much for understanding. I think that's a great idea." So, now obviously, this is a very idealized conversation of what it could look like with a conflict resolution model. There's a chance that your mom could have become defensive or accusatory towards you for bringing this up. She could have also discounted your feelings or left the conflict unresolved. But even during times when a resolution isn't met, it is still helpful to try. Without a resolution, you can still feel better knowing that you tried to resolve the conflict assertively rather than acting passively or aggressively. So now, let's take a look at what a conversation with your neighbor could potentially look like. Again, this is an idealized conversation, but it is a good practice, and most people will actually respond fairly well to it. So you could say something like, "Hi, Bill. Nice to see you. Do you have a minute?" You could say, or I'm sorry, Bill could say, "Yeah, sure." Then you would say, "Great, thanks. I've noticed that you have been leaving some trash out at the curb lately. Some of it has blown onto my yard a few times. There's even some glass bottles in there. It makes me feel nervous about having my kids play in the yard because I'm worried that they may step on something sharp and hurt themselves. Do you think you can only put the trash out on the days that the garbage truck comes rather than leaving it out all week?" Hopefully, Bill would say, "Oh, yeah, I can see your point about that. No problem. I was just doing some spring cleaning and thought it would be better at the curb than in my house. Let me go ahead and move some of that stuff away from your side of the lawn for you and the kids." And then you would say, "I really appreciate that, Bill. Thanks a lot." And then finally, let's look at an example of what a conversation with your spouse could look like. So you might say, "Honey, can we sit down and talk for a minute?" And your spouse would say, "Yeah, sure. What's up?" And you could say, "Great. I wanted to let you know that I was really excited to celebrate our anniversary this year. When you didn't plan anything, it made me feel like you didn't care about me. I know money is tight right now, but when I feel this way, we end up fighting more often, and I just feel myself growing apart from you. I don't want that to happen. Is there something you can try to do to help turn things around this year?" And then maybe he could say, "I really don't want that to happen, and I don't like that you're feeling this way. I guess I just didn't realize how important this was to you. How about we do a nice date this weekend to make it up to you? I'll plan everything." And then you could say, "That would be so nice. I'm so excited." So hopefully you've been able to follow along and relate these examples to a personal conflict that you're going through right now. If so, then you're well on your way to feeling more in control of your relationships and circumstances. It's an empowering feeling, isn't it? So now that you've planned out how you're going to handle the conflict you're going through, it's time to give it a test run. I'd like you to actually implement these skills we just covered in resolving your conflict in your personal life this week. Good luck!